really pleased to then now hand over to Hayley and Louise to introduce themselves and then go through a bit more around the enhanced group in terms of that. But we'll circle back as well. If you have any questions, as I said, please use the chat.
So I'm going to kick us off, and then I'll hand over to Hayley, and then we're going to do this as a bit of a twosome. So you'll see us handing backwards and forwards to each other. So for those of you that don't know me, and I do know lots of you on the call, surprisingly, it shows you how old I am. My name's Louise Boston. I'm the strategic head of health and wellbeing for E.ON, the utilities firm. I have been in this job for about 17 years, but have managed health and well-being within organisations of a variety of types for well over 30 years now. And the types of organisations that I've worked in, well, I've worked for media, for the BBC, I've worked in leisure for places like Butlins, I've worked at some of the major airports, again, doing pretty much the same job. So surprisingly, it doesn't matter where you work, ultimately, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So my background is well-being, but it's also occupational health. So by trade, I guess, I'm an occupational health nurse, have been in nursing since I was 17, started off as an occupational health nurse before we expanded that role to include well-being, and that was probably, as I say, about 30 years ago. Still manage occupational health and still consult on occupational health and talk around occupational health on a fairly regular basis. And those of you that go to conferences such as the Water Cooler Conference or the NEC, some of the other conferences, you'll have seen me talking about occupational health and case management and health surveillance and all of those other more traditional health related issues. So why did I get involved in Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing? I'm a great supporter, if you like, of networking and sharing best practice. But when we talk about sharing best practice, it's not just about best practice. And we've heard best practice mentioned across the last couple of groups, but it's all about sharing learnings, because we're not going to get it right all of the time. We will get it wrong. We will make mistakes. We will be made to feel a bit silly. We'll come away from work one day and think, well, why on earth did I say that, or put in that initiative, or suggest that type of program? And that's where we learn, and that's where we'll learn from each other. So it's not just about raising our flags and sharing best practice that's out there and saying, look at me and look how well I did. It's also about saying, look at the mistakes I made. And how we can all learn from them and limit our risk. And risk is a word that you're going to see coming up again and again in this particular group. It's that piece around risk management, integrated strategy. So it takes on a slightly different meaning, this group, to some of the others that we've had before. I'll hand over to Hayley now briefly, and then we'll talk in a little while again about innovation and what that means. So Hayley, over to you.
Thank you, Louise. Welcome everybody. It's great to see so many of us on the call, and it's great to be amongst a group of leadership team who are giving their time, I think, to improve and to enhance this conversation. So I'm really excited to be a part of that. So I'm the Global Wellbeing and Resilience Lead at Arcadis. I also wear the hat of program managing our affinity group. So I've got quite an intersectional role with ED&I as well as wellbeing. I have only been in the role for 8 or 9 months now. I was at MCOR UK, which is facilities management, and it is there that I implemented the ISO 45003 accreditation and aligned our wellbeing strategy with an occupational health and safety management system. which is probably why I'm here today, and is very much the conversation that leads this enhancing space. Regardless of what you call it, you will actually find Louise and I leading this group have got very similar views, but different language, different terminology, and it's part of this challenging space, which I think is really exciting for us. So I come from a people background, an HR background. I then moved into health and safety, sustainability, social value, as well as risk management. And this is actually where my role of being wellbeing lead at MCOR sat, alongside risk and health and safety. I have done my CIPD level 7. I then went on to do an auditing certification. I'm also a personal trainer and a mindfulness coach. So I've got quite a few different lenses in terms of, what are we looking at when we talk about well-being? But it always lands with me, this risk-based approach that Louise has spoken about. And I think what's really important for me in terms of enhancing strategy and where we sit, and we're going to explore that, but part of what I do is about a needs analysis, understanding the maturity of the organization that you're in. What do they need? What are their imminent risks to their people? And what can you control as the organization? And where can you have the biggest impact? You then develop the strategy, which is measurable, evaluate, and continuous improvement. It's so important that we do look to continuously improve and challenge, as Louise spoke about as well. So that's a little bit about me. What I'm going to do now is share my screen. Hopefully it works. And just bring up a model that Louise and I have come up with to help you understand what we're talking about and where we see this enhancing group focusing on. So I'm going to start and kick us off on this, and then Louise will come in. But what we've created is essentially a number of pillars that make up our wellbeing strategy. Now, there might be things that aren't on here. We couldn't capture everything, otherwise we'd be here all day. But we're looking at 3 buckets. So how do we respond to ill health? How do we promote flourishing? And how do we prevent harm? Responding to ill health is interventions focused primarily on responding to distressed or psychologically harmed workers. So giving people the resources to go to when they are unwell. So it's more reactive, less proactive. When we talk about promoting flourishing, how do we optimize workers' mental health and well-being? So how do we encourage them to self-manage, to take a more proactive approach to their own well-being through education, through awareness, through identifying early warning signs, but also through strength-based interventions. So looking at positive work design. So is your job designed in a way that is good for you? We spend so much time at work. Can we make sure that it keeps you healthy and well? But then we move more into this prevention of harm, which is a much more proactive upstream approach. And it's identifying, understanding, and responding to the risks that may have a likelihood to cause harm. Okay. And that's really this risk-based systems approach. So that's where we as organizations can have control, where we're able to identify, put in interventions, and also monitor and measure those interventions to have a positive impact on well-being. Louise, I'm going to hand over to you to see if there's anything you want to add before we go into innovation.
Yeah, I would just say that where does this group fit, and then how do we intend to achieve some of this? I think what's really important that we haven't mentioned in that model is that the work we do is data driven. So understanding where we get our data from, what that looks like, how we can potentially use it. What we haven't spoken about is positive commercial impact. So whatever we do, we've got to make a difference to the business. It's all very well putting this in, but we recognise that we're a cost to any organisation, whatever that organisation might be, and we've got to have a positive commercial impact on it. And then I think Hayley mentioned it very briefly, but then we need to evaluate it. because if we're not evaluating and we're not understanding that impact that we're making, we don't know if that's working. We don't know the difference that we're actually making. And that's where I see the enhancing group fitting, is being able to deliver. We've already got a strategy, we've already implemented a strategy, but actually, are we managing those risks? Are we evaluating those risks? Is it data driven, and are we having a positive impact commercially? All of which will become important, and that's what we've got to share. Hayley.
Absolutely. I think just to wrap up a couple of things from me is, Louise has mentioned this group is about, you've got a strategy in place. It's an evidence-based strategy, but we're looking to achieve parity between physical and psychological safety. You know, organizations have done safety really, really well in the UK. They've got it right. What can we learn from safety? How can we challenge the status quo in terms of what we're doing in mental health and psychological well-being? And how can we make it part of the organization so that it's a language that we use every day? What we also want this group to be able to do is people to be part of the group who have autonomy to make those decisions within their organization, so that they're able to take some of this learning back, implement, and also feedback, so that we're able to learn together. Lastly, from me is, what can you get out of this group? And it's very important that, you know, we're all busy. We've all got 101 plates to spin at any given time. And I think one thing is, often we can talk about a lot of things, but can we actually share practical lived experience, or even share a link to a document, or rather than recreate the wheel in every single one of our organizations? Yes, we're all different. Yes, we've got our own challenges, but some things can we make a little bit easier for each other? You know, Hannah's pointed it out in her opening piece. This is a safe space so that we can lean on each other, and where we can say, you know what, do you have something that I can just kind of adapt and use for my organization as well? So we really want that to be part of the conversation. So thank you for your time, and we hope that that gives you a bit of flavor of what we'll be discussing in our enhancing group. Thanks, Nurse.
Thank you so much, ladies. That is really insightful, and I hope from the audience perspective, it gives you a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of what we're talking about: implement, embed, and then looking at enhancing. I know every time I get to attend one of these sessions with any group of wellbeing leads who are part of Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, I always find myself learning even more each time. And this is the thing, is it's a collaboration, and it's the coming together to make our tasks a lot more easier, because we already have a tough time of it, I must admit, in the wellbeing space, and we know it's extremely challenging. So thank you for that. I think what I took away, especially in terms of enhancing, is just really looking at that risk management, which was often the gap I found. I didn't quite understand how to pivot a strategy from embed up to enhance, especially linking up to risk management. And that positive commercial impact.